Sonic the Hedgehog in Robotnik's laboratory. The story starts by boringly wasting my time reiterating Eggman's origin story from the Sega of America Bible in one page. It is for the best because it makes Eggman's level of evil make sense, but it sure was boring to see it told to me again. Oh, it does have a few differences. Sonic stumbles into Eggman's lab instead of waking up in it. And Sonic didn't even get a chance to find the Gramble before Eggman got turned evil. That makes more sense because the machine shouldn't have exploded after getting what was supposed to stabilize it. The story says Sonic had already foiled Eggman's plans twice by the time of this plot. It starts for real with Sonic fortunately saying home sweet home as he puts his carryall on the ground after going on a train Tails had fun on. I guess the reason they wasted time going on a train despite how fast Sonic is that Tails wanted to experience a train ride for the sake of it. And because it went down a specific route. It'd be nice if the writer cared enough to tell me how they have a house. When Sonic was 15 at the time, and no one outside of Japan knew Tails could build things. I always have to assume the government gave him a house and money for beating Eggman. Because you can't just build a house and have working electricity, and the government would want to tax you for it if you did. Somehow, Sonic's spines were a little droopy just because he was tired. Magically. Also somehow, ingesting nachos and cola would put some pizzazz back into them magically. It's nice to learn some of the stuff Sonic likes to eat and drink, and it's interesting that Sonic wants those things instead of just chili dogs. He lampshades, "Don't tell me I was there," being unnecessarily rude to Tails, because he has an attitude, and it was impossible to learn from playing Sonic 2 that it didn't apply to Tails. He's still nice enough to hope Sally and Porker got their postcards, Sally being the official name of the squirrel from Sonic 1, and Porker being the name of the pig there. Of course, Sonic wants to delay the unpacking and relax first. Him wanting to watch a video makes sense because he's tired. He must be tired from staying up late. The story says ever since Sonic became Super Sonic, he's had to eat more than most people to keep his metabolism going. Logically, he'd have to eat so much it'd become impossible for him to eat enough to survive. And he won't have to. So this is overthinking it. Because either way, it's magical that he only has to eat as little as he does. It says that when Sonic isn't thinking about how cool he looks, or whether his shoes were clean, he was thinking about his stomach. It acknowledges that usually Sonic's confidence would be a flaw, and so it's even more impressive that he still chooses to be a hero, rather than having him be a Gary Stu until you're bored of him. Him having a little vanity is the natural result of him being cocky. Well, it is a little annoying. Every flaw is. And it hadn't occurred to me, but that translates him wanting his shoes to be clean too. But it would be out of character if he cared too much about the prospect of his shoes getting dirty. Because at no point in Sonic Heroes did he complain about his shoes getting dirty. He could have just still been bothered by it and not complained, never mind. I like that the story says the two of them sped off, so it knows Tails is fast. 3 hours later, Sonic wants to do something. So he could stay up all night if he just kept eating. That's weird. He wants to find their friends and party with some holiday stories. He also wants to find out if Porker got the luminous custard bomb he sent him to make him start glowing as a prank. I hope it's explained that Porker's inconvenienced him on the same level Knuckles has, or been annoying like Antoine, because otherwise it'd be out of character for Sonic to prank a friend. Even Fleetway Sonic hasn't done that. Sonic and Tails wait for Porker to open the door, uncharacteristically wanting to throw a pie at an innocent person while Tails is wearing a ghost costume. I'm pretty sure Sonic's attitude was meant to apply to bad people specifically, since he's supposed to be cool. That type of person would also have an attitude with anyone stupid, which is why Sonic gets mad at Knuckles, but Porker's neither. Porker's not home, so Sonic runs to Sally's house, and Tails almost trips because for no reason he wasn't flying. They don't find Sally. And after a tour of Green Hill Zone that left Sonic's shoes almost sizzling, even though the whole point of them is that they don't burn off, they find out that Johnny and Flicky are gone too. The bird Flicky was originally going to be reinvented for Sadiam's main cast. I guess it's supposed to be realistic that the custard pie is starting to collapse. Tails asks Sonic to give this up because he's not having fun anymore. Sonic opens Porker's door and sees that his house is messy when it usually isn't because Porker is the only non-messy friend he has. He could have discovered that he was kidnapped earlier if he hadn't been too polite to barge into the house when he's already impolite enough to plan a prank. It also says that even Sonic himself is fine with living in a pigsty. It says that Porker was fussy about his playing cards and hated losing one from a pack. Why is Sonic friends with him when he's nothing like him? He won't continue admiring someone who pranks him, and just admiring him shouldn't make him be considered his friend. That's just a fanboy. Did he grow up around him? What is it they have in common? Tails finds their postcard on the floor, which was a view of the icy purple mountains of Springyard Zone. That's nice. It's believable that Sonic would have brought Tails to visit the place he saw in Sonic 1, and it shows even more respect for the games. Tails wouldn't say pignapped when he's taking this seriously. Sonic thinks that the absence of his friends is suspicious, but decides to check out the nachos bar just in case. To be fair, he wasn't told where Eggman's activity or base is. If he turns out to know that, then there's no excuse. Even if he doesn't know that, you'd think it'd be only natural for him to check Metropolis Zone, just in case. He gets told by the chicken behind the counter that Porker hasn't been seen in days. It's repetitive that Sonic's eating more of the same thing. The chicken tells them that none of their friends have been seen for days except for Tunks, another animal from Sonic 1 that would have been made into a Sadia main character in the prototype that was here yesterday. I would have a reason to care about what Booty likes to eat if I had been told his personality first, which is the important thing. Like, it's a part of a personality, but it's an extremely minor one. What's a bendy burger? It doesn't seem to be a real thing that exists except for being based on the character Bendy. Why would that even be referenced? Why did this guy even tell Sonic what he ordered? Tails calls Sonic Buddy, and Sonic somehow decides to prioritize drinking a chocolate soda over heading to Tunks, even though if he had some right now, he might be able to prevent his kidnapping. Well, if he's willing to let Eggman outrun him in the classics just so that he could have fun fighting the mecha he'd get into, which prioritizes his own pleasure over preventing Eggman from doing anything evil to anyone again. By the same logic, he would also prioritize his own pleasure here over trying to prevent Eggman from doing something evil again. And since I still like Sonic in spite of that, it'd be unfair if I hated him for this, or any selfish moment really, just because it's a new mistake of his, and thus more annoying. Along the way to Tux's, they predictably find out that Sally's house was also a mess. It turns out Sally is usually even tidier than Porker. Even though the story last page said that Porker is the only tidy friend he has. Why did he change his mind? Did he hear about what Sally was like in Sadia? They find out Tux's door was left open and there were signs of a struggle throughout the room. And whoever taken Tux had surprisingly taken the fish out of his fridge too and left the fridge door open, which would have cost him money. Why would Eggman only steal food from that fridge? I didn't know he had such specific food tastes. He was described as egg-loving earlier in the book. I guess he only got hungry at this point. The story doesn't take itself seriously enough when it says that when the bad guys resort to fish napping, things are serious. As if they weren't serious before. Somehow, Tails wonders what it means that help was spelled out in fridge magnet letters. Sonic asks if Tails can smell something when he should already assume he does. Somehow, he doesn't smell what he smelled right away, even though the smell was rotten eggs. So Sonic calls him stupid impulsively. Tails had left the camera he had on the whole time, and Sonic conveniently discovers from the footage immediately that there's footage of the Eggmobile. I call it the Eggmobile because Egg-O-Matic takes longer, but that's what it's really called. He sees the speck disappear, because the robot flying the ship engaged something that let it enter one of the warps of confusion above the planet. The Special Zone entrances, as established by Say Sonic. Sonic assumes that the disappearance of the Eggmobile meant it went to the Special Zone. the narration shouldn't have called it just a lucky guess, because it's the logical conclusion to come to since he had already been in that place and hadn't seen Eggman make an invisibility field. It's annoying that the story says both Tails and Sonic were having a think, and they didn't much care for this. And thinking made their brains hurt. He couldn't have known. But Sonic isn't stupid either. There was no proof that he was a genius back then, but there was no proof that he was stupid either. Tails says that the ship looked like it was heading for Labyrinth Zone. How is thinking out loud harder than it looks? But it makes him relatable that it says he had watched movies. It'd be lame if you were only ever shown Sonic and Tails hanging out when either they were on an adventure or Tails was in trouble, because that wouldn't give the impression that they had a bond and did other stuff together. Sonic says they should go to Labyrinth Zone just in case before they try raiding Eggman's lab. Just because the ship looked like it was heading for that place. Somehow, Sonic wonders why his friends were captured. Even this very book's prologue said Eggman had started stuffing animals and robots. Why would he think he stopped? Any battery would be a more efficient energy source than animals, but it misses the whole point that he didn't care about that and he put them in them anyways because he's sadistic. So why would he stop? Somehow, he thought he was always after Tails, because Tails apparently knows some of his scientific secrets. That's impressive. So we're gonna find out what those secrets are, right? You'd think Sonic would be the one who knows them, because he worked for him when he was a good person. It's too bad Sonic's the one who comes up with the plan. He finishes stuffing the packs of chips, peanuts, and tortilla chips into a bag he had draped around Tails' neck. It says the same plan that he had already come up with as if it was an elaboration. Unfortunately, Tails is confused. But all it takes is for Tails to see him run away and he admires him again. You'd think he'd have gotten used to it by now, especially since he's almost as fast as him. It says Tails broke into his famous super dash and streaked off in a puff of dust. Why is there dust when he ran off inside of a house? Then it says that Sonic can stop as fast as he can run, but then acknowledges that he'd have to ignore the overshooting problem. Sonic gets dirt on his shoes when he stops in the middle of Labyrinth Zone and says gross. Tails goes slamming into the back of Sonic, which somehow isn't described as hurting him, even though the back of Sonic is spiky. His rings must have protected him. How's he not watching where he was going? Sonic's in a bush and lampshades that wasn't very clever of you. Tails turns around to see a many-legged creature of a species he'd never seen before on a rock with a shell lower half and eyes on stalks. So, a realistic crab with a shell. Tails is smart enough to be polite to it just in case, because he's a well-brought-up sort. Even though the writer must know he's an orphan who only recently met his only legal guardian. Maybe he thinks Tails' parents did raise him, but recently died for no reason. The game never tells you, so how is he supposed to know? Tails asks, "What are you?" and the creature says he's rude, and tells him what he means when he clearly didn't mean that. I hate that it says Sonic had picked up Tails and was threatening to use him to polish his shoes. Silently, apparently, because it always tells us the dialogue. The creature says he's not a prawn. He's a king prawn called Peter. But then he reveals he's an actual king, so he really is the prawn. He's just stupid. And realistically demands them to speak with a tone of groveling because of it. King Acorn didn't go that far. Peter says he's doing a royal walkabout. It's admirable that he still gets exercise like that. The story wastes my time for a while. He calls a buzzer Badnik by a different name because Eggman had done so when referring to a new version of it that downloads info from a computer. It's boring again, and then Sonic asks him why he doesn't have a crown, and gets told that it's too darn heavy, which is humorous, but makes me wonder why they didn't make a lighter crown, and that someone would steal it. And he likes to be a royal with the common touch. He's delusional, because if that were true, he wouldn't whine about being talked to informally. He didn't even complain about Sonic talking to him informally again, so he's not really that bad. Sonic thanks him and even bothers to nod his head in something like a bow. It's not so weird though, because he says the dismissive Yeah, well, right before this, so he's only humoring him. Sonic bounces off some things long before the wall jump was invented, and before Sonic CD, which is impressive. He destroys the Buzzdownik, and Tails gets hit on the head by the heavy bolts of it, which sends him crashing into a computer hard enough to make it hum and pop buttons off the keyboard and flash multicolored lights, and then finally explode. So he made it explode itself by damaging it. Well, that's a weird computer. Tails won't be injured after what happened, and I'm forced to assume it's because he had rings. So why didn't an animal come out of the Buzzdownik? Well, rings came out of the Badniks and Knuckles Chaotix, so I have to assume that invisible rings came out of it. What falls out of the exploding terminal are springs that wrap themselves around Sonic and Tails as a buzzer gets closer. Finally, something actually interesting happens. At first I counted the prawn as new, but it's such a low bar to credit a new species of animal as a new idea, when you expect that with every new character. Eventually, the springs fall off in all directions, and Tails kicks the buzzer to destroy it. Tails frees Sonic, who asks for his brush and finds it because he was smart enough to keep it stored near him. Tails says one spring's left, and Peter says they're microchips. Somehow, Sonic's suspicious that he knows a lot about this, even though he had already explained that he knows what he does because he heard Eggman talking to a robot, when it would have been faster if Eggman had programmed the robot to already know the exposition. A small gray-shelled prawn whispers in Peter's ear, and he says sorry and inexplicably calls them groveling, and says he has to go home for some reason because his daughter can't keep her food down. Somehow that requires his presence. Why did he think she was whispering in his ear? The jerk told him that anyways. Sonic generously gives him a packet of nachos, assuming just because he likes them that she'd be able to hold them down. I hate that he says he eats them during meals and way too frequently in the day. I didn't want him to have another food he ate too much of, because that gets boring. Still, it's more believable that he'd eat too many uncooked nacho chips instead of chili dogs, which are an actually filling meal. It's also good that this king lives in Labyrinth Zone, because it develops the place. So it's not just a reference, it's being used. I hate that Tails thinks microchips are food, even though the thing that was clearly being referred to was metallic. Did Charmy make a joke like that? Sonic calls him silly and says it's a big mistake while actually using dated slang. It also says he's trying to remember some of what he learned about computers when Eggman was good. Too bad he didn't write any of that down, as would be common sense. The story says Brainwork calls for more food, and they're down to just peanuts, so he wants to find someone who could help them discover what's on the microchip. Uncharacteristically, Tails wishes they would slow down a bit after all the exploring they did. But still, it's common sense to assume he has about the same stamina as Sonic, because he can keep up with him. Also, it's good that the writer has Sonic eating food in the levels. It actually acknowledges in a game-like setting that he would need to eat. It's realistic, as long as they don't overuse it. Surprisingly, the story says having to keep swimming. That's what happens when a writer isn't given all the info in a character. That's weird, but he's already flawed enough, so he doesn't need to be unable to swim to be believable. And the only reason Sonic can't swim is because Yuji Naka thought hedgehogs can't swim, so it was really a stupid idea in the first place. It's smart of him to get swimming lessons. It's never even gonna factor into the plot that he's swimming instead of running, so you could imagine it either way and it wouldn't even matter. Naturally, Tails says that he should just assume it would be like how it was last time when Eggman imprisoned their friends in prison eggs, and not worry about the microchip. He's being written as the audience surrogate here. Sonic insists that this time Eggman must have a different plan, just because he's a genius, which isn't necessarily proof that he's right. I suppose it's believable that he'd have doubt that he would do nothing but the same old thing, especially because he's only gone on 2 adventures. Of course he wouldn't know the game's work. They hear a wailing sound, and eventually go deep underground. Tails complains because it's dark, cold, dank, and smelly. I don't feel like it's like him to be like this, with the narration saying that he wasn't made of truly heroic stuff. If that was true, he wouldn't have even gone on any of his adventures in the first place. They hear an electronic keyboard that sounds bad in the echoing caves, and they duck in and out of the deepest roots of huge trees and find a mole person. I'd rather there be a new idea that isn't a new character. That's more impressive. Sonic puts peanuts in his mouth to make him stop singing because he's selfish, when he could have just talked to him to shut him up. Even Fleetway Sonic wasn't like this. Obviously there was room for interpretation at this point, but it's still pretty stupid to portray someone who's supposed to be likable like that. He lies that he just thought he'd be hungry. I don't think Sonic would lie unnecessarily. The game's never established one way or the other, but it's common sense to assume that of a hero. It's no wonder I hated him in AOSCH, where he lied every episode. Steve says he's Steve the Mole, and the narrator says that him saying his last name was unnecessary because you'd have to be blind not to see that. So I appreciate that. Back when it first came out, I don't think Knuckles was even out yet, so it hadn't even gotten to the point where this would be a criticism of the characters in the games. But in retrospect, I'm glad that was finally lampshaded. Sonic again lies and calls Tails his friend, while unnecessarily drawing attention to the two Tails that he used to be bullied for, and says what he needs help with. The mole hopes his friends aren't worms, which is racism that neither the narrative or heroes seem opposed to. Tails turns out to lie down too, as Sonic hypocritically tells him that if he tells lies, he might be facing a dangerous robot while making an American pop culture reference. It really annoyed me that he's claiming to be against lies when he tells them. And Tails doesn't even think you're a hypocrite. Conveniently, the mole has something he can plug the spring microchip into. He ends up lamely trying to sound cool just from slang. Somehow it took a half hour for Sonic and Tails to run away, not wanting to hear the singing. Tails says that on their holiday they had seen a fake vending machine that shocked them. So that's new. Sonic reveals confusingly that the power of the emeralds are still orbiting Mobius as the source of his power, which implies that in this book's version of Sonic 2, he never got all of the emeralds, and never did in Sonic 1 either, even though that gives you the good ending, so you'd assume it's canon. This is only off-putting because I'd expect Sonic to be cool enough to have gotten all of the emeralds both times. But I totally understand why the writer wrote this. Realistically, he wouldn't have gotten the emeralds because those special stages are ridiculously hard. Somehow it's revealed that without the emeralds, Eggman wouldn't be able to do heinous stuff like kidnapping. What makes him think that? Sonic says Eggman has these computers around and expects anyone who knows where the gray emerald is to tell him. He should explain there's a catch reward, because why else would someone do that for him? Also, why is he telling him this when he should already know it? They've been friends for a while. Sonic figures out that Tails got shocked because the computers don't want a known enemy to use them. Why did he only just now assume this? Then the story says that Sonic's friends are trapped in a new lab which has Eggman's new assistant robot Eggor in it, an unnecessary character who experiments on the prisoners. I like that the story says Porker Lewis is the smartest of them. It respects Sonic the comic. One of the prisoners is Chirps the Chicken, another of the named animals from Sonic 1 that was originally planned to be one of the main casts of SatAM. Somehow the food is okay here, even though Eggman's the most evil person ever. Porker has to repeatedly push a lever to get food. This takes advantage of Eggman being about technology too. It's new as well. It didn't need to establish what it was like for them here, but it was just barely interesting enough to make the scene worth it. Chirps looks forward to his space flight, because Eggman told Eggor he's sending him to the planet Kentucky. Somehow he thinks coding means coat. He should know what Eggman does to people. He sucks. Porker's too nice to tell him what this means. It finally goes back to the impatient Sonic, and insists on saying Tails was being slow to understand what he was telling him about what was in the microchips. There's a list of all their friends in the computer and instructions for the robots to bring them to a new lab. They could have guessed that. Tails even did, but of course he doesn't get to rub it in his face. Sonic says that Tails is usually triumphantly brilliant, which is a nice confusing surprise, but rings hollow when he's been stupid so far. It's also annoying that it says Sonic disapproves of Tails' thinking instead of fighting robots or computers. I mean, it is a lot cooler to see him fight robots or computers. But it's the other extreme. Tails says they could capture a robot because they must know where the new lab is, or else they wouldn't know where to take their friends. He shouldn't even suggest finding more computers without also saying, and bring someone the computers aren't rigged against, like Steve. Tails says they could try to find out if other people know about the lab or where else the robots have been heading. He says they could also disguise themselves as their friends to try to fool robots into trying to kidnap them so they wouldn't have to tire themselves out searching for their friends anymore. The narration admits that Tails had some good ideas. I'm impressed that the writer put in the effort of listing so many ideas. Sonic plans on returning to Green Hill to stock up on pizza and chocolate soda. Good. I not only learned where his house is, but another thing he likes to eat. It's too bad his house is in a location we're all sick of instead of Emerald Hill. Edgar inexplicably tries to convince Porker to let him scan his brain for being smart instead of just taking action. At least Porker threatens him. But Edgar says that if Porker did bite him, he'd break his teeth. Why is Edgar here instead of Eggman? What purpose could he serve that Eggman can't already do? Porker also at least tries to find out why Eggman's experimenting on them, which is a good question, because torturing them would keep it simple, and also be sadistic while experiments are convoluted. Edgar hadn't expected Porker to be a hassle. Neither had I. This is confusing, but less annoying than him being a one-note coward. Edgar uses a hypnotizing ray to put him to sleep. What took him so long? I guess it doesn't have rechargeable batteries, so I want to use it as little as possible. Eggman arrives when it's very late at night, and yet only by now is he licking the last of its supper off his hands. Raw eggs with Tabasco pepper sauce. I assume the reason he has a gross-sounding favorite food is because he's evil, even though that insults any real people with gross favorite foods. He'd only still be up if he works too much. And that's not enough personality traits yet. I guess I'd expect Eggman to be a hedonist, which is the opposite of a workaholic. Because he boasts about himself. At least he has a favorite food. But what food a character likes is less important than what he's like. I hope Eggman gets given a good reason to wear a white lab coat. Part of his appeal is that he doesn't wear one. He's also called gross by the narration for getting egg stains on his coat and making a slurp as he licks the last of the yolk. It's not something the games showed him as being like, but there's plenty of room for interpretation. And again, he's evil, so it makes perfect sense that they would portray him as that, because screw evil people. He's shown the brain scan of Porker, and Edgar pushes the pizza button for him. And Eggman angrily lectures that he has to press the lever before he gets it, and insults him. I already assumed he was easily angered. Another thing the dialogue's been doing with these two is forcing egg puns every time there's an X sound, which is a lame and dissonant attempt at comedy SCC already did. Eggman wanted the brain scan done so he could get enough info from his brain to put him into a machine to know how to deal with Sonic. Sally's the only one of the lab animals who is still awake, and the narration shows her as cool and smart too early, and only then says she learned to press levers to get food before all of the others. What was the point of her staying up to eavesdrop on Eggman if she was too nice to tell her friends what she'd heard? The narration doesn't reveal what the acronym for Eggman's machine stands for, with the excuse, "We don't want to worry you." If that was true, we wouldn't have been told why Eggman wanted the brain scan done. It's revealed that Stevie insisted on singing what the microchips had stored. Sonic and Tails had learned there was one master computer that held all of the info from the terminals, including the secret location of the new lab. and they had learned that that was where their friends were. The narration does the audience a favor by shortening the story from what it could have been if it had shown in real time with dialogue what the protagonist did before their pizza ran out. It says they tried to get information from their monkey friends, and the rest isn't creative either. Coconut's badniks will look a lot like real animals. I'm pretty sure I used to think they were real animals, so I don't really blame the writer for getting confused and thinking there really were a bunch of monkeys in Emerald Hill Zone. Who's to say there weren't, and we just didn't see them? I don't even see the point of talking about the story at points where all it's doing is having Sonic deal with badniks for the trillionth time, which doesn't make an interesting story. Sonic sees in Aquatic Ruin a huge amount of non-Roman people who are dressed like Roman soldiers. The narration only makes him sound lame by saying that they never throw anyone to lions because they're too scared to catch any, which means that it's not taking them too seriously. But apart from that, they're worryingly similar to Romans. Their leader wants to arrest Sonic and Tails while thinking they're funny looking, as if they've never seen Mobians before. And he doesn't recognize them either. But if it was explained that they just came out of another dimension, they wouldn't be developing Aquatic Ruin Zone. Sonic should know better than to try to talk them out of this. He's handed the idiot ball so that they could throw a net over him and Tails, who should have flown out of the way of one. And I'm forced to assume the net's made of adamantium, so that's why he doesn't just spin dash straight through them with his sharp spines. At least these Romans are doing something new with the game setting. And because they're an antagonistic team, I know that I'm supposed to hate them. And I've already seen them get put in a net in the Sonic Adventures comic later. And I've already seen Roman-like people in STC and Sonic Underground. Though this is 1993, so it probably did all that first. One of the Romans has some misplaced comedy relief because he assumes Tails is a girl for having two tails. Sonic and Tails get taken in front of their Emperor, who hears them talk and refuses to eat them because of it. The leader of the Legionaries points out that he shouldn't talk as if he's opposed to eating blue things when he isn't. He wouldn't point out that the Emperor is wrong. And the Emperor wouldn't take so long to tell him to shut up. The Emperor also says he'll only punish him if he does this again. What a nice guy. He has a moss-covered tree stump throne. Tails starts telling the Emperor the truth, and Sonic takes a desperate measure of kicking him to shut him up because he doesn't think they should give their quests away, and it's not explained why. So not only is that annoying, but so is his excuse for it. At least he only did it because he thought he had to, not because he's abusive. Sonic lies that he came here to sample the blueberry ice cream soda they have. The Emperor is smart enough to not believe Sonic and say that they're really here for the terminal. But why does he care what they do? Are they working for Eggman? Sonic lies that terminal is a secret code for soda. The Emperor's left foot catches in a vine and he trips and falls over backwards with his legs in the air, causing everyone but Sonic to snicker at seeing his yellow flowered boxer shorts. At least the story's trying to make up for how annoying and depressing the Romans capturing these guys are by mocking them. And it's not Earth itself, so I'm not going to say it's portraying them wrong.